You are listening to Three Kitchens podcast, hosted by Heather Dyer and Aaron Walker. To find our complete catalog of episodes, check out any of your favorite podcast players.
Or our website, threekitchenspodcast.com.
All right. Well, hello and welcome to Three Kitchens podcast. My name is Aaron Walker, and here joining me is my co-host, Heather Dyer. Hello, Heather.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm well. Well enough.
Well enough for a Monday morning.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, today we also have Nancy May joining us from the Family Tree Food and Stories podcast and book. So Nancy and her friend Silvia have co-created a book and have a companion podcast called Family Tree Food Stories. And so she's joining us today to tell us all about it. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I've been listening to your podcast and it's great. I love it.
Thank you.
We've been enjoying yours too.
Right back at you.
Yeah.
Pod pals.
Right?
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about the book and the podcast, what it's all about?
Sure. Well, let me start with the podcast and then I'll go to the book. The podcast is all about how to look at the food and the family relationships and the traditions that we have and the history of food and gathering. It's the one thing that we will travel hill and dale across country, get on planes and go, and travel for long distances to do. Is to eat. Yes, we'll see family too, but one of the things is the adventure of the food and the stories and everything around it, and the generations that have really brought those stories together in such a way that is so rich. That could be as simple as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, all the way on to a coq au vin, whatever it might be. I don't do that. And the book is called My Family Tree Food and Stories. And what Silvia Lovely, my co-author and co-host in the podcast, have done is collected stories from many different people. And there's tiny little stories that give you an example of what you can do to capture those really wonderful, memorable moments, whether they be good or sad or quirky and funny, and turn them into connections into the recipes that have made your life so rich. And it's a journal, so you can create your own stories, you can add your own recipes. There's a way to trace your family history in the back as it relates to, well, here's mom's apple pie and great grandma's soup, all the way down to maybe what you did in grammar school with your own recipes as a kid. So that's what we do.
A lot of us look for ways to not just compile recipes that we like to make. You hear people all the time, what are you using? Are you doing the Pinterest board? Do you have a recipe box? Do you have a journal? What are you doing to record and store those recipes? But particularly when it's something that's handed down, maybe you don't have it written somewhere, it's not on your computer. How do you bring those things together in a way that is you can cook from and enjoy and share?
Mm-hmm. And we tend not to do that. You remember them and you put those stories together in your head, and occasionally you bring them out, but they are so rich with color and life, to the point that, quite frankly, food and those stories really add to who we are as families and individuals. They make us strong, they make us real, and they give us a point of connection that is so endearing, whether it be, around your own kitchen table, or my dad would always bring salesmen to our home to sit and have dinner with us, or they'd go out and they'd have a meal together. But he always brought them to the family table too. And that really showed the measure of the person that he was hiring. How did they react? How did they behave? And I think that's so important. And the rich cultural heritage of our foods shape our character.
I love that there's such a strong connection around a dinner table and eating and sharing that meal with somebody. And we've brought this up many times with other guests that it's something that easily gets lost, especially now where people don't feel comfortable cooking anymore. People are too busy to sit down and share that meal. And we love hearing these stories because I hope it motivates people to be like, oh, I need to sit down and share a meal with my family this week, at least once, right?
But we forget about those things, and quite frankly, I believe we're looking for a little bit more personal connection that we've had in the past. You know, we've gone through the generation of everything is about speed, moving so fast. You've got to connect on your phone. Now we're into the loneliness epidemic where people don't know how to
Mm.
connect with one another. And the easiest thing to do is to really just sit down at a table and I wouldn't say force yourself to talk, but when there's just food on the plate and there's nothing else, there's no other sound, sooner or later somebody's going to say, so it's just amazing how powerful
Mm.
food can really be. And those stories, if you are so committed, shows through of your engagement. It shows you who you are as a person.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
So, should we jump into the recipe that you shared with us?
Sure, I'd love to do that.
yeah, but
Excellent.
Nancy, why did you choose this recipe to share? Can you tell us something about it and why it's special?
Sure. I call this mom's special chicken or birthday chicken. And it was a recipe that my mom had made time and time again. And it was my favorite. It evokes, it's a very personal kind of recipe. And it was an easy one to do. It's one that I've shared with friends and family members. You know, I could do it in my sleep, literally. It's so easy to do and it's special. Every time it was my birthday, mom would say, what do you want for what do you want for your birthday? Mom's special chicken. That was it.
Is
And
it a recipe that you asked your mom for, or was it something that you made with her, or is it something that you've just kind of put together out of memory, or how did the recipe get passed on to you?
my mom followed recipes.
Okay.
My mom found recipes and she used them and then, she might, she liked it, she'd do it again and again and she wouldn't have to look at a recipe again. But one of her favorite books, and I think it came out of this one, was Make It Now, Bake It Later. But it was a simple meal. It was very easy to do. And so it was her recipe that she got someplace else.
Mm.
And it just became sort of a staple on special occasions. And growing up, steak was sort of, beef was the meat of the day that was more cost effective, and chicken was expensive. So chicken was a special
Mm.
meal, and yeah, that's that's hers. And then I
Interesting
asked
how,
her, it's like, how do you make that, mom? And I would watch her.
Mm.
yeah,
So yeah,
interesting how times change, hey? With
right.
what's the expensive cut of meat now?
That
It
is
won't
a
be the
Moo.
same,
really
but
that is a really interesting thought. Yeah, how that's changed. Huh.
yeah.
And fish was inexpensive then too. So shows you how
Hmm.
old I am.
Now nothing's inexpensive, but
No,
um,
no, right? You flour,
um,
what I do is
sorry,
I
I'm
just
looking
take
at
a
myself.
plastic bag, you throw flour in it, right? And with a little salt and pepper, any kind of other spice. If you want a little garlic in there, you can throw a little garlic powder in there too. But you throw the chicken in there. And I've always found that you're better off using chicken breasts that have the bone in it. It works good with the dark meat too, but I think it works better with a nice, real meaty chicken breast
Hmm.
versus just a deboned chicken. It just doesn't seem to have the same kind of flavor. But
Mm.
you get nice and floury, and then you brown it in a skillet. Make sure it's nice and crusty, and it's got a good color to it on both sides. And then you stick it in a baking pan, depending upon how many people you're serving. So if it's four people, four chicken breasts, go that way. And then you take apricot jelly or apricot jam and you put it in a mixing bowl and you fill that jar up with about three-quarters of the way with white wine. Take the white wine, put it in with the jam, and you mix it till it's melted. Once that's done, you pour that over your chicken, and that's in the baking crock, and then sprinkle it with pinoli nuts if you don't have those. Pecans work a little bit better than walnuts because the walnuts don't are a little drier flavor and the pecans are a little sweeter flavor to them. And you don't have to use nuts either, but it just adds a little extra texture. And then you bake it in the oven like 325, 345 for about 45 minutes till they're done. And voila, that's it.
Um,
If you want to make it look pretty, you can add a little parsley too.
oh, yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I had to look up what those pignoli nuts are because I'd never heard of that. And so I
Oh,
Googled it, and another name is pine nuts. So
yes.
there you go. That was familiar to me. I was like, oh, it's pine nuts. I had no idea. Uh, and then what size of jar of preserves do you typically use?
Well, it depends upon how much chicken you have, right? So
Okay.
there's like that's I'm not a grandmother, but there's the grandmother in me saying, well, it depends,
Yeah.
right?
And there's
Well,
the
right. I,
and
I
there's
would
the
say
less
it's like
experienced
I
cook
think
in
it's
me
like a
saying,
10 ounces, right? Depending about how much meat you have in. You can do a larger jar, but I would say, at least a cup and a half of preserves. You can also
okay.
substitute the apricot preserves for orange marmalade if you want. But
Oh.
the apricot gives it a nicer flavor, I think.
I like
It's
the
just a
apricot
different flavor. So you
actually.
can
Yeah.
use one or the other.
Yeah. No, but I
Yeah.
did feel like I might have had too much liquid.
Mm.
I did feel
Ah,
like I ended up with more liquid than I was imagining there was going to be. I had a
actually, it is kind of liquidy afterwards.
okay, okay.
So there's a lot of liquid in there. And what's nice about that is put it over rice and it just like the rice soaks it up. So it's really got a nice sort of sweet flavor to it.
I had
Mm.
made egg noodles. So we did some homemade egg noodles with our special chicken, and it was really delicious. I like the sweetness of this recipe,
Right? And it's
which
not
is
too
Mhm.
sweet.
yeah, it's something I don't typically like. Usually, when I'm making chicken, I tend to go a bit more of the savory, spicy.
Mhm.
So it was a nice change. I don't know. What did you think of it, Erin? We haven't discussed it.
We haven't discussed it yet. We
Oh,
try and save it for in the moment. This was, I loved this day that Heather came by because she dropped off the tray of, she had made me an entire serving for my family, plus
Oh,
egg noodles. But they thought it was great. I liked the apricot flavor a lot in
mm-hmm.
this. My first thought, because we had talked a little bit about the measurements, was like, did your mom make this with homemade like preserves? Was she no?
no, it's, whatever, the standard craft or whatever it was of the brand of the day. And you can use
Yeah.
the fancier preserves, but it really doesn't make any difference. And as we're talking, I'm thinking if you want a little bit more savory, I would experiment and just, do the same recipe and throw a couple of slices of lemon on top of it while it's cooking, which would probably take a little bit
Ooh.
of the sweetness, but also give it a little bit of a sort of a zing without making it sour, which would be
Hmm.
kind of nice too. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
Ooh,
that's
very, very good.
so
And you can
good.
you can even add some rosemary probably to that
mm.
mom's special chicken to give that extra little zip to it
Oh,
as well, because chicken is
yeah.
always good with rosemary, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
Always.
would do that. Have some fun
Yeah.
with it. It's a very forgiving recipe. I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I would think if you didn't have wine or you're not a fan of it, you could probably use chicken broth
Oh,
or,
I would
you
imagine.
know,
Yeah.
something
That
like
might that might that's worth a try because you got the chicken in there already,
yeah.
Hmm.
and it might make it a little bit more savory. I
Well,
might
can
try.
you tell all of our listeners how they get their hands on your book and where to find your podcast?
Sure, the podcast is at podcast familytreefoodstories.com. It's familytreefoodstories.com podcast. And the book is called My Family Tree Food and Stories. Let me see if we get a big picture there. It's on
Nice.
Amazon and it looks kind of like this. There's a picture of a tree on the front and a book and a family under the tree. It looks like a tree of life with fruit and vegetables on it. And It's My Family Tree Food and Stories, your personal journal of favorite and memorable foods, recipes, and stories to remember and share. And it's written by Silvia Lovely and myself, Nancy May. And we actually add with your family and friends because you're the ones who are actually authoring it. But we have a whole lot of hints and tips on how to do things. And it's beautifully illustrated. It's 272 pages, including notes and stories, and lots of room to have fun and make every meal a memory, and every story is a feast. So that's kind of our slogan.
That's really nice. And we, of course, will link to the podcast and the where to buy the book on the show notes. So, listener, go ahead and scroll down and find that. And we encourage everybody to go and follow along and listen to the stories. We're really enjoying listening to your podcast and hearing these lovely little memories and the recipes too. But it's really about the memory and the story that people share with their recipe.
Food is so rich in our minds in so many ways, and it fills our bellies, and we enjoy the taste, but it really is, it's the stories and the memories that are left behind afterwards, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Really.
now for the fine print. Links to recipes and other things we talked about in this episode can be found in the show notes or on our website, www.threekitchenspodcast.com. Come say hello on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and TikTok. We'd love to connect. And if you enjoy the show, pass it on. Word of mouth is the #1 way people learn about new podcasts. Thank you so much for listening.